right, y'all know what time it is. Those are the sirens. You can hear them. They coming to get you. This is for the 2-2 in the new year. And we making it happen, everybody. So, welcome to 2022. Thanks for coming back for the GameFi podcast. We're talking gaming, arts, music, esports, and film. You joined us today. We have a very special guest. We're going to talk about part of the industry, the gaming industry that not a lot of people talk about. And we're going to get into that real soon. But again, thank you so much. Hopefully y'all got what y'all wanted for Christmas. We in the Kwanzaa, so if you're celebrating Kwanzaa, make sure you on your Ujima, your Kubichakalima. I forgot down there, and my kids are gonna get me because you know what, we packed up our house because we were doing some construction, and so we packed up all our Kwanzaa stuff. So I'm not even on my side. I just remember Ujima. I think it's corporate. What do you call it? Economics. Corporative economics. It's something that we've been practicing on there. But again, welcome to the GameFi podcast, where we talk everything gaming, arts, music, esports, and film. So we got a guest in here today. I'm gonna just go ahead and let you introduce yourself, and we'll start it with that. So, sir, who are you?
Hey, great to be here. I'm Will Roger. I'm a music composer for video games. Most recently, the Call of Duty World War II and Mortal Kombat 11.
Wow.
And, yeah.
So some iconic games. Will Roger, it's first of all, thanks for coming and sharing this time with us. We know time is very, very important. And I tell people, you know, I'm going to thank people for the time that they spend with me, especially that's one of my new things for 2022. We giving grace to everybody because, you know, things not going to be able to happen, not going to happen the way that we think. We're going to plan for a lot of stuff. But, you know, we got this this elephant roaming out there, this cloud that's out there over everybody traveling or trying to do a bunch of different things, and so we're going to make sure that we give each other grace. We're not going to, and we've been in this for 2 years now. So, you know, we can't go back to how we did things before. We can't go back to business as usual. The status quo, we're not going to do that. But what we are going to do is we're going to show how things are evolving and show how we are in things in the industry that are COVID protected. You know, video games, the gaming industry itself is a pretty much COVID proof industry. Outside of the face-to-face events that we would do throughout the year, it's pretty much COVID proof on that end. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the gaming segment. All right, y'all. GameFi podcast, everything gaming, arts, music, esports, and film. We're getting into the gaming segment and talk everything gaming. And this is an interesting part. It's going to be a theme today. Pretty much going to be throwing everything back to the music side of things when it comes to whatever we're going to talk about today. And I want to make sure I squeeze every bit of knowledge that I can in this short time that I have you here, so we can let everybody know the possibilities that exist in the industry for what it is they want to do and be a part of. So the gaming, so as per usual, brought to us by Pharaoh's Conclave and PCX Go. This year, we are opening up our first cohort for the year in the spring semester for our game design pathway, and so comic book creation and pro gaming are open as well, and so you can go to our website www.pcxnow, as in right now, pcxnow.com, to find more information about our cohorts, Level Up Academy. So make sure you check that out. And so now going into the gaming segment. So when we first introduced Will, before we really get started, when did you first fall in love with video games, Will?
You know, it's interesting. I actually didn't grow up with video games necessarily. Maybe my little friends in school had their little Nintendos and whatnot, but, my parents were a little older, so we didn't really have video games in the house. And it wasn't until middle school when I was at my seventh grade friend's birthday party that I first discovered Mortal Kombat. Ironically, funny enough, and it was this arcade machine. Everything was so realistic. It was so like the graphics are never getting better than this. This is amazing. It's like
So we thought. So we thought.
of course, yeah. But it had this aesthetic of real life, real ultra violence, and a very cinematic presentation, and I fell in love with it immediately. And that kind of started the little spark of hey, I want to kind of do this whole video game thing, at least just as a player. It also got me interested in more in action films and martial arts and all that kind of thing. And then it wasn't until I guess my freshman year of high school that I discovered the game Final Fantasy VII.
Wow.
And that's the title that basically said, hey, yeah, you've been doing the whole. I was a concert pianist, like classical pianist, basically my entire life.
Wait a minute. Oh yeah, we gonna talk about that in the music segment. Classical.
Oh sure.
Piano.
Yeah.
Oh man,
I've been
awesome.
A classical pianist since I was like 4 years old or something.
Wait a minute. So we got a prodigy over here. Okay.
Not a prodigy, just a very annoying kid whose parents wanted to get rid of them. So they just lied to the teachers. They're like, "Oh yeah, he's like 7 years old. You take him. Please get rid of this kid." And so I would take piano lessons because that was their break. Just be happy with my absence for a little while.
Right.
But yeah, it was Final Fantasy VII, and something about that score just told me you need to be doing this. Writing music for video games.
Nice.
And that was what, like, more than 24 years ago, 25, something like that. And yeah, ever since I've been writing music for video games.
Man, and for you to figure that out as soon as you did, people like I didn't really land on, being a part of the video gaming industry the way I am now until, I probably, let's see, I'm 43, so what, 35? I played video games all my life. I've been around it, but I didn't know I could actually do something, right, and really be a part of it. So, and that's what we have created this forum to do, to be able to let people know, hey, you can start now. It doesn't matter how old you are, but the sooner you start, the better, because then you can start tinkering around and figuring some things out on that end.
Absolutely.
So Mortal Kombat and Final Fantasy, from those. So you have the traditional arcade game, but on the Final Fantasy now you have the role-playing game, and so you have the whole storyline and the characters that come in, because Final Fantasy was like a movie, and they've made movies about it, and so I think that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about Final Fantasy as well, because it was a story, and I felt like I was immersed in it as we went through it. So with that, you knew you wanted to do it. What step did you take at that point? So now you heard this. So what was the next step that you took on that journey?
Yeah, there was actually a couple of different things that I did. The first thing I did was, I hadn't thought about it from the business perspective just yet, because I was like 14. So instead, I just wanted to study everything that I could about the medium. And, this was 1997.
Mm-hmm.
There were no books or you couldn't take any classes. There's no YouTube or anything like that. And in fact, there was also no music readily available either. Because even though some of the Japanese games, they had, video.
There you go. I just figured out I didn't have my video on. So everybody, this is a Zoom. First of all, let everybody know where you are right now, Will.
I'm in Seattle, Washington.
Seattle, Washington. So it's raining here. I know it's probably like storming over there.
We've actually had snow for the last couple days.
Oh my goodness. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's been I guess in Fahrenheit, it's been like down to minus 19. I'm sorry, not minus 19, just 19 degrees Fahrenheit for the last bit.
Oh my goodness. Ooh. Yeah, I'm glad I'm down south. Uh-oh. Hold on one second. Okay. We almost out of space on my card. All right. It just says limited. All right. So we're going to probably edit that out. But so we got that. You know which way you want to head. Which you might hear the sirens in the background. We are downtown Atlanta. It ain't no telling what's going on.
Yeah.
So we
So
got
yeah.
Mortal
So
Kombat, Final
yeah.
Fantasy, and you ready to start to take it on.
Yeah. So I mean, my first step was I just wanted to learn as much as I could. And the way that I did this was through a lot of transcription of game music. Because remember, this is actually before MP3 files even existed.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
so if you wanted to listen to your favorite music from whatever RPG or video game or whatever, you had to listen to the MIDI file that was transcribed note by note by some basement dwelling nerd with no life. And I was one of those basement dwelling nerds with no life. That's what I did. I would record
there's
the
nothing
music
wrong with
onto
being
my,
in the basement
I'd
at all.
record the music from the game onto my little tape cassettes, and then play it back, and then transcribe it, figure it out note by note. And doing that actually taught me not only how the music was written, and like what notes they used and what instruments and whatnot, but also why they made some of the decisions that they made. It's a very active form of listening. I think that transcription actually is the best way to learn any new styles of music. I still do it to this day when I'm trying to learn something new.
Okay.
And it's how all of the great composers of back in the classical era, it's how they all learned how to write music actually.
Nice. See?
So I mean, it was a great sort of self-training in how to learn this medium.
Man, that is solid. So now you get into more of the artistry of doing what you're doing. That being said, we're just gonna go ahead and transition into the art segment. Hello, everybody. GameFi podcast, Coach E here with Will Roger, and we're getting into this thing. He's been putting music into the game for a long time, and so we're really dissecting that right now. And I'm glad you guys are on this journey with us today. And so we're going to get more into the artistry. So we talked about the humble beginnings of Little Will on his journey into putting music in the games and transcribing it, and now we're going to drill down a little bit deeper into it and really figure out what was the driving force and get some nuggets for you all prospective composers out there that are making beats and writing music right now. Let's really figure out how do it. Let's talk a little bit more about the artistry behind things. So Will, classical composers, that this is the kind of traditional way of composing music and putting things together. So what do you see when you're doing this? I'm a mathematician, and I'm very interested to hear what you're saying, because I think it's probably the same thing that I see when I'm doing math and answering and figuring out equations. We're probably seeing the same things. So when you're composing and transcribing this music, what are the images that you're seeing?
Do you mean like if I'm scoring for a game specifically, and like what do the developers show me of the game, or do you mean on a more like metaphysical level?
More on a metaphysical level. And then we can say, okay, how does that transcribe to? Because I think everybody growing up, like when I would read stories, in my mind, I would have a movie playing. Like I could see the story happening in my mind. I could see the colors. I could actually hear the accents of the people talking. And I would, if it was a name, if it was a foreign name, if it was a Frenchman or someone like that, I would say their names, and I would be surprised when I would actually see the movies to hear it sound, or hear it. First of all, hear the people sounding the same way and seeing some of the same types of scenes. So as you're transcribing, like what are you like? What senses are in being brought to the forefront when you're doing that?
Well, no one's ever asked that before. It's kind of weird. So I don't know if I have like any kind of like a synesthesia or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm listening to music, and if I'm like really paying attention, first of all, I do have like I guess the perfect pitch or whatever, and so whenever I hear a note, I know what note it is. But it kind of goes a weird step further, where like it almost sounds like the instrument is actually saying the name of the note that it's playing, which is like really strange.
Wow.
And in fact, it gets real weird, because if I don't like actively fight against this, even when people are talking, there's always a chance that like the part of my brain that's like, oh yeah, it's English, will just shut off and then be overridden by like, now I'm just hearing a string of notes and not paying any attention to whatever it is that they're trying to tell me. And so it's like, okay, this is not, think about that. But yeah, when I'm listening to music, I actually hear it a little bit in 3D. So every aspect of, say I'm like listening to like, like a rock song or something. Every aspect of it has a place in 3D that it's kind of making. So imagine like a black void, and each instrument is within this black void in some sort of a place. So like, I don't know, maybe you have the hi-hats and they're, kind of over here to the left in this stereo image, and they're kind of, maybe they have a spiky sort of image, and then the snare is sort of in the center, and then you have some guitars, maybe they've hard panned them left and right so I can kind of hear them. And they're a little closer in 3D, and maybe they're like red in color, and they're kind of doing that. And then of course the notes themselves I'm hearing, and it's kind of this visual type thing. When I'm writing, however, it's a little different because it's more like this is gonna sound so weird, but like, do you remember in Black Panther that whole like the ancestral
yeah
this like whole alternate reality? It's almost like the music is already written, it's already done, like the whole thing, and I just kind of step into this alternate reality, and I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, let me just try to transcribe what's already there. Like the piece is already done. I just going in there and trying my best to like, okay, well, what note did you use here? Where is that? And then back to reality. And I have it, I write everything on paper. That's kind of my way of sketching. And
tradition.
I'll look at it. Yeah, it's very kind of old school. And I'll look at it and I'll be like, okay, here in this reality, we have to do certain things constructively to make it an optimal piece, make it memorable. So how do I take that initial spark of creativity and sort of finesse it so that it's that it sounds good? Really, that's all there is to it, and sounds memorable and all that.
And what you just did was exactly what I was asking and what I was doing, because I know for me on the engineering and mathematics side, as I'm working on a project, as I'm when I was teaching and I'm solving equations with students, and that was kind of the point that I was trying to get students to. I remember one of my architecture classes that I took, and I had a professor who he was from I believe he was from Iran, and he would talk about when he was going from learning. His grandfather was saying when you try to learn a different language and you going from English to Arabic or whatever language you want to go from, you can't. Sometimes we spend a lot of time translating, and then we try to say it, but then you have to immerse yourself in it and actually speak in it. And so you have to transport yourself into it, like, okay, I'm going to be English now, or I'm going to be Arabic, or I'm going to be French now. And you have to see yourself as that, and you have to hear that and immerse yourself in that language to be able to do. And so for me, mathematics has always been a language. And that was what I would try to tell my students. You have to immerse yourself in the language. I see it floating around. Like, I don't know if it was A Beautiful Mind or any of those movies where somebody was doing mathematics and it's floating in the air. I think Kevin Hart had a movie that was similar to that when he was trying to, he had to go back to school. I think it was night school. And he had to go back to it, and he would see the stuff floating. But I was like, and I was telling my principal, for me, teaching or just doing math is like that. I can see it. I'm in this plane and it's moving around. And like you said, I'm putting the numbers where they need to be. I'm like, I see this equation over here and I'm deriving this one. They come together and another one comes out. It's so metaphysical for me, and I enjoy it. And that's why I love it. And I think for anybody in any area that you're trying to do, being able to step into that, because I hear similar things from, screenwriters. I hear similar things from writers, traditional print writers. They're in it, and it's just them grabbing it at that point. They see it all the time. So it's very vivid, and there's artistry. And then to see that come alive, that's awesome, because there are some games that actually do that. They give life to it. I don't know if it's the onomatopoeia or whatever the reference is, where you give life to something inanimate. That's what's happening on that. So I'm glad you said that. and stepping into that and not being afraid to do it, because I think some people are afraid when you start going in and out like that. They're afraid to allow that part of yourself to come out, but then also to have the discipline to be able to control that, to say, okay, I know I can stay over here for a little while, but I got to come back. And then, to really be able to put it out and put it together and construct it the way it needs to be constructed. That was beautiful. I love the way you put that. And with that, we're going to transition on over to the music segment. Yeah. GameFi podcast, everybody. It's the music segment, as we already talked about the gaming and the arts. With my man, Will Roger, dropping knowledge right here, helping us to see what he sees in the lab, in his creation. Mad scientist and it all. I just made up a word for mad scientist right here, getting into these things. So, Will, we're going to keep it going. So now we're in the music segment. So we talked a little bit about, just kind of what drives you and your passion of where you got it from, how do you do some of the things you do. Let's talk a little bit more about the journey. So you talked about earlier being young and, going to class, piano class and other classes. To be a composer, to be a musician, a really good musician, what first of all, what was some of the journey you took after that? What were some of the things you knew you needed to acquire, skills you need to acquire to develop your craft? And what would you suggest is a good path or an entry point for those who want to come in, who already are dabbling in composing, who are dabbling in, if you're making beats, you're composing. If you're writing raps, if you're writing songs, you're composing. You might not know the technical terms for everything, but you're already in it. But talk a little bit about your journey to get to where you are as far as being professional, and then what would be, if you could go back, what would be kind of the straight line journey, if you will?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack. I'm trying to figure out how do I want to answer this question. I almost want to answer it in reverse.
Go for it.
You know what? I will. Screw it. So the first thing I'll say is I don't like the straight line. I don't like the idea of let me get as successful as efficiently and quickly as possible. There's a quote that I don't know who came up with it, but I heard it from Morgan Freeman, who's an actor who, he didn't become the Morgan Freeman until much later in his life. He was maybe 50 or something when he had his first very big roles. And the quote is, "Early to rise, early to fall." And a lot of folks, especially young folks, it's very understandable that they want, and I was the same way. They want to have that success like right away. They want to, get in and, really, make a big splash. And that's great. And you'll need that enthusiasm. You'll really need that enthusiasm for something like music. But the longer that it takes, the more you'll have to say. I mean, I envision this industry as like, this is actually an insanely competitive industry. Video game music, there's a shocking number of people, and it just gets more and more every year that are trying to get in, and there's only so many projects. And to me, I imagine like an auditorium, and it's filled to the brim, like way too crowded. It's like a COVID nightmare. And everyone is fighting and scratching and clawing and elbowing each other to get to this microphone. That's just one microphone at the center of the room. But once people get there, they have nothing to say, because all they've been worried about was just getting to the microphone. And then once they're there, it's like, okay, now what? So you have to make sure that you have something to say. And the way to do that is to have experience, to study, not make kind of I hate to use the word excuses, but you know what I mean, like excuses for yourself, like, oh, I don't have this equipment, but whatever, here's this. I mean, it's very difficult. I think it's actually harder to get started now than it was back when I got started, because when I got started, there was no equipment. It was going to sound like pretty much garbage. I had to use General MIDI for everything for years before I could even do my own sampling. And when I did my own sampling, it was with like extraordinarily old, very pathetic technologies like DLS, which no one's heard of, or sound fonts, which very few people have heard of. And, but it was like very gradually bringing in the the more technical production side of things. And instead, I was focused on the composition, learning harmony, learning melody, learning rhythm, and all of these aspects that aren't as sexy and flashy and like, hey, look how awesome I am. This is something I can show you right away, and I look amazing. This is so great. Instead, it was, no, let me actually learn how to do it. And I think that's what's carried me throughout my whole career. If you want to, I'll just, run through exactly what happened. It was high school. I'm doing these transcriptions. Eventually, I found some communities online, like web forums, with fans of video game music. And through those forums, I found communities of video game makers. So I started to score some indie games. Didn't really go anywhere, but it was a great experience. That's actually finishing a project.
Right.
By the way, is another great piece of advice: finish something. Everyone's got like their folder of 5,000 half finished, half started ideas, and that's great. But you literally just like level up when you finish something. This is why game jams are fantastic. Game jams are when a group of people makes an entire video game in an extremely limited period of time, like maybe 2 days.
Oh yeah.
Do a game jam score, and you'll level up just the same as you would if you finished like an entire, full length game score. I promise you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But anyway, so it was.
I've been in a few of those game jams. Shouts out to Ron Jones with Indie Cluster. They do a lot of those, and I've been a part of those, and I've had fun at them. But finishing the project, I love how you said that. Keep going. I'm sorry. That jumped in my head.
No, absolutely. Finish a project, put it up online. Get your SoundCloud or Real Crafter. I recommend over SoundCloud. Or YouTube is also great. They both have way better sound quality than SoundCloud. But anyway, I was doing these projects all throughout high school. I went to Yale University for music, and it was just a regular undergrad. It wasn't like the music school, but I majored in music there. And once again, I didn't focus on anything technical. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the moment that I walked into the building, I already knew more on the technical side than anyone there. So there wasn't really anything to learn there. But that was actually great because I could focus on the compositional aspects, learning, to expand my mind, and honestly to ask deeper questions than everyone else was. Everyone else is just like, what samples do I use? Whatever. And they're all writing with the same harmonic structures, kind of the same melodies as everyone else, whatever's popular. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to expand my horizons a little bit and do something that I thought was a little bit more unique and thoughtful. So yeah, I studied the more like art music side of composition, like modern classical composition all throughout college. Not a lot of which is relevant, but it was a nice journey to go on. And then once I graduated, then I started to join the Game Audio Network Guild, which is just as it sounds, it's a group of audio professionals in this industry. And they had a nice forum. I got to meet a lot of audio directors and other composers and sound designers. And I started to go to the Game Developers Conference, which is a yearly conference in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually from that, I got hired to be a music assistant and music editor at LucasArts, where I stayed for about 5 years. I think after the first couple of months, I realized we were working on the Star Wars Force Unleashed series.
Okay.
And I realized that we needed a lot more help, not so much on what I was doing, which is the music editing, but we needed help on the technical side of how do you get the music to actually play back in the game. So I taught myself a lot of that. I took some classes in Python and Lua scripting so that I could do that work myself. We usually would, have other people outside of the audio team do that. But I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why don't I just do it? And in doing that, I actually kind of became the technical person on the audio team so that people would come to me when they had other issues or troubleshooting, or if eventually we switched to Unreal Engine and the WY's audio engine. And I kind of became the resource for like, hey, we need help for this technical thing. Let's just ask Will.
Right. So you're
Additionally,
the thought leader at that point when it comes to that. And
a little bit, yeah. I mean,
no,
somewhat. It
you
was
be
more just like
I'm not gonna.
people
I'm gonna
needed
give you
help.
your flowers on that one. You, Will Roger, thought leader, music in
Sure.
the game.
The fun story actually is how I actually started writing original music for LucasArts. Because when I was hired, they pretty much told me like, just so you know, you're not here as a composer. You're here as like music editing and all that, whatever else we needed you to do. And I was fine with that because it was such a great experience. But once again, just like I said, it's not all about like the most efficient way to get to your goal, but it's about the journey and what do you pick up, what do you learn along the way. So we were working on a game called Star Wars: The Old Republic, which is like a big MMO, one of the biggest MMOs actually that ever existed. And they had, I think, 4 composers for that. But I accidentally overheard the music supervisor and the audio director talking about how, oh, the deadline is crazy and we'll never make it in time. We need a 5th composer. And I'm just thinking like, well, I'm right here. You don't even have to pay me anything because I'm already on staff. So screw it. So that very night, I went home, I wrote a demo piece, and I came up, the next day and kind of forced them to listen to it. And they're like, oh yeah, I guess you can write Star Wars, cool. And originally they were like, oh well, we'll test the waters. Maybe you'll write like 20 minutes of some less important cues, and that'll kind of help us out. But I ended up writing about over an hour of music for the game, and it was my
Wow.
first time working with a live orchestra and the live choir and everything. We recorded up at Skywalker Ranch, which was really cool.
Wow.
And it was a fantastic experience. And that led to both of those. The reason this is such a long story is that both of those aspects, learning the technical thing and getting to do the composition thing, led to me kind of getting promoted to now being more of like a music supervisor and and composer. So I was the supervisor for the second Monkey Island special edition series, which is a great opportunity for me to learn the business side of handling budgets, managing other people, working with producers and whatnot. And then eventually my own game, which was Star Wars First Assault,
Okay.
which is the final thing that I worked on at LucasArts. And finally, all that aside, after LucasArts shut down with the Disney buyout, I became a freelance composer. And so that's where I am now, where I set up my own business and I'm just working independently for various clients and, dealing with the business side of like, how do you get work? How do you meet new potential clients? Do you need an agent? How do you manage the finances, the budgeting, hiring an orchestra yourself? How do you work with contractors? And all those kinds of more business side questions suddenly became quickly and extremely relevant. But yeah, that was the journey. This is, we're talking on the order of, 20 something years before I did any, full game score. But, my first GDC was 2006. And I'm sorry, my first game developers conference. That's the first conference for video game development that I'd ever been to. And I remember coming home from that thinking, yeah, I'm gonna get a job tomorrow. And this will be great. I'm so great. Look at me. I have this demo reel, and everyone's gonna hear it, and they'll just hire me right away. And it wouldn't be, I don't know, 10 years maybe until I got to that point. And this is already, I'd already finished school. I'd already finished, training. I was already somewhat professional level. But just being, I guess the lesson is like just being like the professional level is never enough because who else is? Every other.
That's right. Everybody else. You're not competing against the people in your town. You're not competing against the state, nation. You're at this point. We're global.
Exactly.
We're global, so you got to do it, man. That is incredible. That journey in and of itself is incredible because there's a lot of other little things that we can unpack along the way from a student standpoint that they should pick up from what you were saying. The first thing that popped out when you were talking about working in Lucas Studios, and they said, hey, they're having a conversation. Well, if you weren't in that room, if you wouldn't have heard that conversation, and had you not done some of the things foundationally prior to that, you had the opportunity to become that fifth composer. And I always say, opportunities only show up. Opportunity only come to those who show up to get them, right? You got to be in the right place. And so you wanted to be a composer, but you started where you could start. You found an entry point. You worked on that entry point, and then the opportunity came, and you were able to take advantage of the opportunity because you prepared yourself. You were in that room full of people trying to get to that microphone, and you got your chance to get to the microphone, but guess what? You actually had something to say because of all the work that you put in prior to. That is amazing in and of itself. Oh man. So yeah, I think we're gonna have to definitely do some part 2 to this. We're gonna look at this and break it down a little bit. We're gonna move on to the next segment, the esports segment, and because I want to know how has the rise of esports, how has that affected what you wanted to do? So y'all hear the drummer marching down the start everything up. Here this is the Game of Podcast. Stuff here with Neil Roche, learning the ins and outs of each journey and putting the music in the game, which is an underrated part of the game. Not a lot of people talk about it, but just like and we're gonna talk a little bit on the film side. So it's interesting that you said you work with Lucas Studios, film studios, when you started in that, because we're gonna get into that. Because music in movies is like, you can't have a good movie without a good score. That just doesn't happen. I mean, I guess silent movies you can, but that's not what we grew up on. We grew up on movies with music, and it's the drama, the ebbs and the flows that you need to have, just like you gotta have it in the video game as well. Esports segment. So with the rise of esports, how has that affected what you do? Have you seen an uptick in what you do, or some opportunities that you may have had now that esports has gotten the rise that it has?
Once again, I really want to bring it back to it's not about the efficiency of like getting point A to point B in your career, but it's about the journey. And with esports specifically, I just think it's cool. That's all there is to it. I mean, yeah, I just do music for games, but I've really, gotten to love the industry as a whole and to love the communities. And I gotta say, I mean, I'm so grateful for every single game I've gotten to score and all of the communities. But, I started as a Mortal Kombat fan, in middle school, and I was playing fighting games all throughout high school, college. I love fighting games. Particularly Mortal Kombat 3 was my jam all throughout high school, and then eventually more of like a Tekken and Virtua Fighter guy. But the Mortal Kombat community has been so welcoming and so receptive to me personally. On Twitter and even in person. I got to go to the Evo fighting game tournament back in 2019. I guess the last time it was in person. And that's right when Mortal Kombat 11 had launched.
Right,
so
right.
It was the biggest Mortal Kombat tournament that had ever happened. It's just the energy in the room was so colossal. It was so incredible. I remember when the tournament started, they were playing the main theme to Mortal Kombat.
How did that feel?
Huge live speaker. It was crazy. I mean, it's a theme that intentionally kind of starts small and then grows and grows into this like huge epic thing. And just hearing that on these huge speakers, it was surreal. It didn't even seem like this was actually happening.
Wow.
And then of course these amazing, tournament players from literally all around the world competing and, just coming up with ridiculous combos that no one had ever seen and all that. I mean, it was amazing experience. And, it continues, throughout twitch.tv, all of the players there, and of course on Twitter and YouTube. Yeah, I mean, and of course, Call of Duty has its own esports segment as well. A huge,
right.
$1 billion industry there. Which also has been, really fantastic to see that and see how that goes. So yeah, I mean, for me, it doesn't really affect what I do terribly much, but it's still like there's something about just having that experience. I think that maybe something like ticks in the back of my mind now when I'm writing, where it's like, hey, me, as you're writing this, just so you know, at some point the music might be played in like a giant stadium and like thousands of people cheering and stuff, so like maybe make certain decisions creatively that will sort of respect the drama that's natural in that situation.
Wow. Now let me. Did anybody know that it was you? That you were the one that composed the music as the tournament was going on? Were you kind of looking around like, hey, that's me? I wonder if people really know that that's me
Well,
that did that.
so I was hanging out. So the company that produces Mortal Kombat is called NetherRealm, and I was hanging out with some of the NetherRealm folks who were there, which is great. Like they got us like front row seats and everything. So obviously they knew, and we were just like hanging and chilling the whole time. I had been talking with, and this is what I'm talking about. Like a lot of the top players and commentators, I had been chatting with on Twitter for the last couple of months while the game was out. Because again, they were so receptive and so nice to me, and I got to meet them in person, say hi, which was great. Meeting all of these like legendary top players and stuff, which is like it's weird. Like I was super starstruck, but it's like I was I'm the one who made the game.
Exactly.
Weird, like now looking back on it, but like I was starstruck to meet them, but it's like, well, I don't know.
That's crazy, man. Oh man, I can't. Ooh, I can only imagine. I know anything that I've been a part of to see it happen. If it's from the coaching side and seeing players advance to, and this is in regular baseball or football or any other sports. That side is great to see. To see a student or a player to become successful based on something that we worked on. And then, that aha moment for me as an educator, working with students, that aha moment that they actually get it and they're answering, those are the same things I'm getting. And it's like, wow, we're in the meeting with other teachers and they're talking about student performance and mathematics on the test, this, that, and the other, and they're blowing it out the water. And it's like, yeah, I had a little something to do with that. I helped them to realize what they wanted to do, how to do it, and then how to implement it. And they implemented it and they executed it very, very well. So I can only imagine how that felt to actually hear it come alive. And then for you now to say, now it has informed your next creation, because you're not just creating it for an in-home experience or a intimate experience. This may be something that's put out to the masses. So now you have to ratchet up a little bit. You have to, like I said, make a couple different decisions in what you're doing. But it's cool to really talk about that, and for you to say that and bring that in for our students. This is wow, man. This has been great. So now we're gonna go to my favorite segment, is the film segment. I thought I'm a big video game guy, but I think I'm probably more of a film guy than a video game guy. So let's get into that real quick. GameFi podcast, everybody. Film segment here in the new year of 2022. Man, I can't believe it how quickly we've gotten here. It seems like 2021 went by like a breeze. And we're coming in on it right now. So everybody, we with Will Roger here, who is a world-renowned composer of video game music. And I'm telling you, he's laughing right now, but I mean, seriously, this is, getting a chance to talk to you about your transition and how you're becoming. Because for me, on the video game side, I wanted to do more, but I didn't see myself doing it. There wasn't a black guy who I could look at who did these different things as video games, as I was going through Commodore 64 to Atari to Sega to Nintendo to PlayStation. There was nobody I knew about until 2010, when I learned about Gerald Lawson in the 70s, who created the channel F1, right? I didn't know about him. Had I known about him, I would have probably wanted to go into it a little bit more. And the same thing on this, putting music in the games, but also music in films. Scoring is scoring. So, you might have to do it a little differently, but it's the same thing. You want to evoke certain things in people as they're going through certain parts of the game or as they're going through certain parts of the movie. You want them to ride the emotional roller coaster, if you will, and you use the sounds in order to do that. So, have you had an opportunity to put any music in any films?
Oh yeah, I've worked on a lot of different indie films. I haven't really done any like big Hollywood films or anything like that just yet. Because for me personally, I am a lot more passionate about video game scoring, at least currently. Uh, but I'm only 30s of the years old, so it's not
Well, see,
you know.
you young. I'm 43. I'll be 44 in March. So you're still a young man.
Yeah,
So
we
and
have plenty of time. I have plenty
yeah,
of time
and this
to do
and
films
here
and
you
stuff.
said, you started with putting music in indie games. So you're now,
Yeah.
I mean, putting music in indie films. That's how it starts. And then once that indie film, just like an indie game, it gets picked up. Now it's like, okay, bring that team over, and then construct whatever the next thing is going to be. But
Yeah, I
so
mean, in film, it's a little bit different. The way that the blockbuster film industry works is a little different. It's like it's more kind of it's a community, I guess I should say.
okay,
And I mean, I don't necessarily see myself stepping into that because it's such a huge world. But it's just if things come up, then we'll take them as they go. My agents are very big in the film industry, and I told them I'm really interested in video games right now, but just from your opinions, I trust them quite a lot. And if they see some project that they think I would be good for, and obviously if the film directors and producers are like, we want this, this Will Roger guy for he did this game and maybe we want him to do a similar film or something like that, then yeah, I'll consider it. But right now I'm just very passionate about gaming still, so that's kind of where that comes from. That said, a lot of my influence does come from film. I mean,
hmm
some of my favorite composers are John Williams and Thomas Newman, Terrence Blanchard, and
nice.
people who are doing these film and television scores that are so evocative, and they're in a way it's like easier to be evocative because it's just a straight line. The show is always going to play back the exact same way. It's linear, so
Right.
you can kind of develop things in a certain easier way. Whereas in a game, it's a little bit more complicated, a lot more variables. I mean, it's like arithmetic versus algebra, right?
Right.
In
Right.
games, you have that algebraic, like, well, there's X and Y and sometimes Z, so how do you, whatever. Whereas in film, you can focus a little bit more on the music itself, and then the compromises. There's also like a little bit more, you know, interpersonal politics involved in film, which is understandable because
Of
it's
course. Of
very
course.
intimate. But yeah, that's kind of my thing with it. I don't know if this is the right segment to mention this, but the elephant in the room that you did mention is that you grew up and you didn't see a lot of people who looked like you in
Right.
the industry.
Oh, it's
And
always this
obviously,
is always the perfect time to, especially on the GameFi podcast. That's one of the things we do. So go for it. Go all the way in on it.
yeah, obviously I was in the same exact boat. But not only that, but I grew up in Philadelphia, and there's like nothing even remotely related to the game industry there. So like no contacts, no connections, no anything. And then when I look at the ivory tower of the game industry, it's like, yeah, good luck, pal.
Oh
Some
yeah.
little
Oh
kid from
yeah.
Philadelphia, good luck. And the thing that I realized very quickly, and I'll say this once again, is that like writing to a professional level is never remotely enough, and especially for us.
hmm
And additionally, not only do you have that just like on a global level of like, of course, why would I hire just some professional? There's a million others. Why would I hire you? But also, it's like the reality is that economically, there's people out there who have massive advantages. The whole Hollywood studio culture means that they're taking on like composer assistants and unpaid interns that a lot of us could never afford to do that
That's right.
because we would have to pay to live in Los Angeles and like drive everywhere and all of this stuff and still work 80-hour weeks, maybe 100-hour weeks, and not get paid.
Mm.
There's people who can afford to do that because their parents are kind of bankrolling them, and they can also afford to have like the best gear, the best software, the best whatever. but not, obviously it's not one to one, clearly, but like, you might be in a position where you don't have that luxury. So what do you do? And my answer was that, like I said, I just doubled down on the fundamentals. I was like, it's perfectly free to transcribe. It's perfectly free to learn, harmony, because you just listen to stuff, and you sketch on the piano, and you embrace, different forms of music that maybe you weren't into before. YouTube is free.
Oh
You
yeah.
can listen to interesting, different new music. I got into Bulgarian folk music back in high school, which is very interesting form of music that has a completely different style of harmony and rhythm from normal like Western classical music, and that's informed my own writing ever since. And it's things like that. That's free. You can gain as much knowledge as you possibly can in the medium, in the fundamentals, and then once you have the opportunity to maybe get some new piece of gear or whatever, then you could just be very careful about what you buy, and make sure that it's something that's going to last you forever, because you don't have the luxury once again of just buying everything willy-nilly. um, and just keeping in mind that, like, we're playing a slightly different game, and you have to be a little bit careful, a little bit more shrewd, more really just kind of focus on your craft. And you know you have to, I don't want to, I'm dancing around saying like you have to kind of be better than the next guy, and I
And
don't
you
want
don't
to
have
say
to,
that,
don't,
but
I
like
mean, yeah. And as a
it's
coach,
kind of the reality.
exactly. As a coach, when I first started coaching, that was one of the things I wanted to do until I met a master coach. As I was coaching and whatever I'm coaching or teaching, they were like, you want to make sure the students don't feel defeated before they even get started. But at the
Yeah.
same time, you want them to understand the realities that are out there. And so I ain't gonna. You don't have to say it. I'll say it. We got to be twice as good, if not four times as good as a lot of other folks when we get our opportunity. We talk about this all the time. Other cultures can do ideas on the back of a napkin and get fully funded, whereas we have to come in with not only a full-fledged deck plan, business plan, some investment already in hand, but we also have to have proof of concept with a lot of things that
Yeah.
we do. So and that goes back to what you're saying. Finish a project. So as much as you can do, that's and the internet. I will say this. That's one of the things that I feel great about what we're doing right now. Because I mean, some years prior, I probably wouldn't be doing a podcast right now, but it has become more mainstream and easier for me to do it because of where we are technology wise. I can pop up a laptop, put few pieces of equipment together, and we could actually produce a show. You couldn't do that back and forth. You had to go to a studio. You had to do some other things, and so you don't have to do that right now. You can do a lot of these things, like you said, for free at home and you can level up as you go.
Yes.
So, oh man, Will, I'm telling you, you really. This was a very, very good conversation, and thank you again so much for being on GameFi Podcast right now. Where could everybody follow you if they want to learn more about what you're doing, social media handles, and things of that nature?
Yeah, I'm really only on Twitter. So it's at Wilbert Roget, WILBERTROGET.
Okay.
And that's where I'll post my updates. I post a lot of free stuff there, and like tutorials and free sample packs that I make and stuff. I've been doing that recently. Which is
Nice.
a lot of fun. And yeah, that's the main place where I like to interact.
Well, everybody, this has been Will Roget, the composer, video game composer extraordinaire, sharing with you all some great nuggets. Please make sure you follow him on Twitter. Make sure you follow us as well, because we're going to definitely. They're drag racing now. I mean, I guess we're living in the video game here in Atlanta.
Atlanta, right?
Hot Atlanta, and it's actually pretty cold right now. I don't know what they're doing. I guess it's the new year. They want to try out a new toy or something. But again, thank you so much for all the things you've been sharing with us. This has been the GameFi Podcast, where we talk everything gaming, art, music, esports, and film. And we again got a chance to peek behind the curtain of the industry on the music side and how all of the things have been influenced and the things that are going on. And you got a chance to meet Will Roget, and you got a little closer So for you out there who want to do this, you may not be the person who wants to program the game. You may not be the person who wants to do the graphics or build the characters or the storyline. There is a whole segment of music that you can think about. And so find an opportunity for yourself. Listen, learn your craft, get the fundamentals together, and then, go down that pathway, see if you really like it. I think there's an opportunity. I think a lot of people are now transitioning because of the popularity in music. In esports, they're transitioning, or popularity in video games, they're transitioning from mainstream music to thinking about doing music inside of games, creating songs that might get placed in the game, so you can break it out and, give them another touch point to their fans, and being able to do it, and actually doing concerts. Fortnite has been doing concerts inside of their platform, so they're blurring those lines, so everything is now touching one another. You will always have an opportunity to kind of cross-pollinate, if you will, and find no pun intended, Will, cross-pollinate to find what your passion is. So thanks again to Will Roger. Thanks again for you joining us here in the new year. Happy New Year, everybody. This has been the GameFi podcast. A few things coming up. We have our conference that was going to be in person, but again, we want you guys to stay safe out there. So we are now switching to a virtual conference, and so we're going to be doing that. And I think, Will, if you have opportunities sometime in the next 3 months to be a part of another panel discussion, we're going to make this a series, so please come back again and drop some more knowledge and talk to some more students. I think we might have some students actually come in that are in music majors and to thinking about where they want to be and where they want to live, and so this may be something that they never thought about, but I think it's an opportunity. And again, they got to have something to say once they get that opportunity. So that's going to be something I'm going to use. I'm going to let you know I'm still in that right now. I'm still in that whole metaphor with the arena, with the auditorium and the microphone and all that. It's took. I'm going to use that with my students because it's very poignant, what you said. So signing off here, the GameFi podcast. You know what that means. That means we got the sirens coming in. We don't know what's going to happen next. You are in 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. This has been Coach E. And my new tagline for 2022 is going to be practice what you preach and preach what you practice in the new year. So thanks again. And this has been the GameFi podcast. Y'all have a good one. Thanks again, Will. Stay safe out there.